There's a photograph on my mother's mantelpiece, a single frozen moment from a decade ago. In it, my sister Stella and I are standing under a sprawling oak tree, its leaves the color of fire and gold. I am 17, caught mid-laugh, my head thrown back in a rare moment of unburdened joy. But no one ever looks at me. All eyes go to Stella. She is 19, poised and serene, with a smile that seems to hold a gentle, knowing secret. Even then, she had an aura of destiny about her, as if she was already living in the successful future everyone predicted for her. That photograph became the defining summary of our lives. I was the prologue, the funny anecdote you tell before the main event. Stella was the story. Throughout our lives, Stella collected successes the way other people collect stamps. She was the valedictorian, the scholarship winner, the one who went to a prestigious university and graduated with honors. I, on the other hand, drifted. I found my passion not in lecture halls, but in the quiet, dusty corners of old libraries and archives. I became a historical researcher, a job most people in my family found bewilderingly impractical. But what do you do? My aunt would ask at every family gathering, her voice laced with a confusion that bordered on pity. Stella's success was a currency our family understood. She became a high-powered corporate lawyer, bought a stunning apartment downtown, and her life was a curated collection of achievements. My life was a quiet tapestry of half-forgotten stories and the patient work of piecing together the past. I loved it, but I was keenly aware that in the eyes of others, I was the sister who had failed to launch, the one who was still finding her way. And then came Julian. Julian was, in every sense, the perfect final piece to Stella's perfect life. He was a successful architect, handsome in a way that was both classic and kind. He had a warm laugh and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. When Stella brought him home to meet everyone, a collective sigh of relief seemed to pass through the family. Of course, she had found someone like Julian. It was meant to be. I liked him immediately, which almost felt like a betrayal of my own quiet rebellion. He didn't talk about stock portfolios or corporate mergers. He asked me about my work, and his eyes didn't glaze over when I spoke about tracing a family's lineage through forgotten letters from the 19th century. He seemed genuinely fascinated. That must be incredibly rewarding, he said during that first dinner, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. To give people back their history. I'd glanced at Stella, expecting her to steer the conversation back to something more interesting, but she was smiling, basking in the glow of her family's approval of her perfect choice. Eleanor's always been the sentimental one, she said, and it wasn't unkind, but it was a label nonetheless. The dreamer, not the doer. The wedding preparations took over our lives. It was to be the event of the year, a tasteful, extravagant affair that would cement Stella's status as the one who had it all. I was the maid of honor, a role I accepted with a mix of love and resignation. It meant endless weekends of cake tasting, dress fittings, and venue scouting. At every turn, I felt like a satellite orbiting planet Stella. "Oh, Eleanor, that color will just wash you out," Stella would say gently, pointing to a dusty rose bridesmaid dress while she stood radiant in bridal white. "Let's go with the navy. It's much more slimming." I never argued. It was her moment, her world. I was just a supporting character. The engagement party was held at a chic art gallery downtown. Everyone who was anyone was there, a testament to the power couple Stella and Julian were about to become. I moved through the crowd, a glass of champagne in hand, feeling more like a ghost than a guest. I exchanged pleasantries, answered the usual questions about my unusual job, and watched my sister shine. She was incandescent, a star in her own universe. Julian was by her side, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. They looked perfect, unbreakable. Later in the evening, I slipped away to a quieter corner of the gallery, seeking refuge behind a large, abstract sculpture. I just needed a moment to breathe, to be invisible. The pressure of smiling, of pretending I wasn't suffocating in my sister's shadow was exhausting. A shadow fell over me. Hiding? I looked up to see Julian standing there, his expression unreadable. He wasn't smiling his usual, easy smile. "Just catching my breath," I said, attempting a light tone. "It's quite a party. You two did an amazing job." "Stella did an amazing job," he corrected softly, his eyes scanning my face. "I just write the checks." He took a small step closer, lowering his voice. "Can I ask you something? It might be out of line." My heart gave a strange, nervous flutter. "Okay." He looked around, as if to ensure no one else could hear. He met my gaze, his own filled with an unnerving seriousness. "They said your sister was the successful one," he began, his voice barely a whisper. The one who got everything right. He paused, and the silence stretched, thick with unspoken words. Then he leaned in a little closer, his question hanging in the air like a held breath, poised to change everything. But I need to know. Eleanor, are you still single? The question hung in the air between us. So sharp and unexpected, it felt like a physical thing. For a moment, the ambient noise of the party, the clinking glasses, the low hum of conversation, the distant, tasteful music, faded into a dull roar. All I could hear was the frantic, panicked thumping of my own heart. I stared at Julian, searching his face for any sign of a joke, a cruel, misguided attempt at humor. But there was none. His expression was one of profound, almost painful sincerity. His eyes, which I had only ever seen as warm and kind, now held a desperate intensity that unnerved me to my core. "Why would you ask me that?" I finally managed, my voice a breathy whisper. I felt a hot flush of shame and confusion creep up my neck. "You're standing at your own engagement party, with my sister." My words were meant to be an accusation, a shield to push him away, but they came out sounding weak and bewildered. Julian didn't flinch. He seemed to have expected that response. "I know," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I know what this looks like, Eleanor. Believe me, I wouldn't be saying this if I felt I had any other choice. For weeks, I've been telling myself I'm imagining it, that I'm just getting cold feet. But it's not that." He took another small, almost imperceptible step closer. "From the first time we met, at your parents' house, you were the only person who didn't look at me like I was just another one of Stella's acquisitions. You asked me about the buildings I wanted to design, not the ones that made me the most money. You talked about your work with this quiet fire. Everyone else talks, but you listen. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" My mind was reeling, trying to process his words. He was echoing my own feelings of invisibility, but turning them back on me as a virtue. He felt it too, this sense of being a supporting character in the grand production of Stella's life. I had assumed he was the male lead, the co-star. But what if he saw himself as just another prop? "Julian, you can't do this," I stammered, shaking my head as if to clear it. I felt a surge of loyalty, a fierce protective instinct for my sister. Even as a confusing, traitorous part of me felt a flicker of validation. He saw me. He actually saw me. "I'm not trying to do anything," he insisted, his gaze holding mine. "I'm just trying to be honest for once. This whole thing," he gestured vaguely at the glittering party around them, "feels like a performance. Stella is playing the role of the perfect bride, and I'm the perfect groom. We look good on paper. We make sense. But when I'm with you, I feel real. And I just had to know if you were with someone, if you were happy." Before I could form a coherent answer, a bright, melodic voice cut through our tense bubble. "There you are." We both turned, guiltily, like children caught doing something forbidden. Stella was gliding towards us, her smile as radiant as ever, but her eyes held a flicker of curiosity as they darted between Julian and me. "What are you two whispering about so seriously over here?" she asked, her tone light and playful. She looped her arm through Julian's, reclaiming him. The gesture was so natural, so possessive, it sent a pang through my chest. Julian's mask slipped back on so quickly it was almost seamless. His face softened, the intense seriousness vanishing as he smiled down at her. "Just complimenting your maid of honor on her excellent party-hiding skills," he said smoothly. "Eleanor was just telling me how she's much more comfortable with 19th century manuscripts than 21st century crowds." Stella laughed, the sound echoing slightly in the large space. "Oh, that's my Eleanor, always lost in the past." She squeezed Julian's arm. "Come on, darling. My father wants to make a toast, and the photographer wants another shot of us by the entrance." She pulled him away, and Julian gave me one last look over his shoulder. It was a fleeting glance, but it was loaded with everything that had just passed between us. It was an apology, a question, and a promise, all wrapped into one silent, devastating moment. I stood frozen behind the sculpture for a long time, my champagne flute warming in my trembling hand. I watched them across the room, the perfect couple, smiling for the camera. Stella, so bright and confident. Julian, her handsome, successful fiancé, who had just cracked open my entire world with a single, impossible question. He had asked if I was still single. He hadn't waited for an answer, but we both knew what it was. The days following the engagement party were a study in cognitive dissonance. On the surface, everything was normal. I went to work, immersing myself in the comforting certainty of historical records. I helped my mother with seating charts, listened to Stella debate the merits of peonies versus roses, and nodded along as if my world hadn't been tilted on its axis. But beneath the calm facade, a quiet, frantic chaos was raging. Julian's question echoed in my mind, a relentless mantra. "Are you still single?" I tried to dismiss it. He'd had too much champagne. He was just a man panicking at the thought of marriage, latching onto the nearest sympathetic ear. It was a moment of madness, a fleeting, inappropriate slip that meant nothing. But my heart knew better. The raw, desperate honesty in his eyes was not something a person could fake. He had meant it. And worse, a part of me, a shameful, hidden part, had been thrilled to hear it. My relationship with Stella became a minefield of guilt. Every time she spoke of Julian, my stomach twisted. "He's just so supportive, you know?" She told me over coffee one afternoon, scrolling through photos of potential honeymoon destinations on her tablet. "He understands the pressure I'm under at work. He never makes me feel like I have to choose." I looked at my sister, truly looked at her. I saw the genuine love and admiration in her eyes. She wasn't just collecting a prize, she loved Julian. Or, at the very least, she loved the life they had built together, the idea of the future they represented. How could I ever have thought otherwise? My narrative of her as a cold, calculating collector of successes began to crumble, replaced by the much more complicated reality of a woman who was, perhaps, just as vulnerable as I was, only better at hiding it. "He seems like a great guy," I said, and the words felt like ash in my mouth. "He is," she said, smiling, completely oblivious to the turmoil raging within me. "I'm the luckiest woman in the world." 2 days later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something compelled me to answer. "Hello? Eleanor, it's Julian." My breath caught in my throat. I stood up from my desk and walked over to the window of my small apartment, looking down at the street below as if seeking an escape route. "How did you get my number?" "I'm the groom. I have the master list of all contact information," he said. There was a hint of a wry smile in his voice, but it quickly faded. "Listen, I need to apologize. I was completely out of line at the party. I put you in an impossible position, and I'm sorry." Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. It was a mistake. He was taking it back. "It's okay," I said, a little too quickly. "Let's just forget it ever happened." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing. "I can't forget it, Eleanor," he said softly, and the relief curdled back into anxiety. "I'm sorry for how I did it, not for what I said. It's the truest thing I've said in months." "Julian, stop," I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper. "You're getting married to my sister in 3 months. What do you expect me to say to this?" "I don't know," he admitted, and he sounded tired, defeated. "I just know that walking down that aisle feels like walking off a cliff. When I picture my future, the real one, the one I actually want, it's not the penthouse and the corporate dinners. It's quiet evenings, talking about history, about art. It's a life with you." A car horn blared on the street below, jolting me back to reality. This was insane. This was a fantasy. He had constructed a version of me in his head, an escape hatch from his own life, and it wasn't fair to me, and it certainly wasn't fair to Stella. "You don't know me, Julian," I said, my voice firmer now. "You know a version of me you met at a few family dinners. The real me is complicated and messy and not this quiet, romantic ideal you've imagined." "Then let me get to know you," he shot back, a new urgency in his voice. "Just talk to me, as a friend. That's all I'm asking." The word friend was a lie, and we both knew it. There was no friendship to be had here. There was only a chasm of betrayal that was threatening to swallow all 3 of us. "I can't," I said, the words tasting like a final, bitter goodbye. "Please don't call me again. Be happy with my sister. She loves you." I ended the call before he could reply, my hand shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the window, my heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. I had done the right thing, the only right thing. I had chosen my sister. I had chosen loyalty. But as I stood there, watching the anonymous city life unfold below, a single, devastating thought rose to the surface, a truth I could no longer deny. He was wrong. I wasn't just some romantic ideal, but he was right about one thing. In his quiet, desperate confession, he had seen a part of me I had kept hidden from the world, and from myself, and for the first time in my life, I felt seen. And I was terrified that I had just thrown away the only chance I might ever have to feel that way again. Choosing loyalty should have brought peace. It should have felt noble and righteous. Instead, it felt like I had swallowed a stone. For the next several weeks, that stone sat in my gut, heavy and cold, a constant reminder of the phone call I wished I could erase from my memory. I threw myself into my maid of honor duties with a desperate, almost manic energy. I became the most organized, efficient, and sickeningly cheerful maid of honor in history. I finalized the floral arrangements, confirmed the caterers, and created a minute-by-minute timeline for the wedding day. It was a shield, a wall of meaningless tasks I built around myself to keep from thinking, to keep from feeling. Stella was delighted. "Eleanor, you're a lifesaver," she'd exclaim, kissing my cheek before rushing off to a client meeting. "I don't know what I'd do without you. You and Julian are the only two people keeping me sane right now." Every mention of his name was a small, sharp jab. I avoided him as much as possible. If he was at Stella's apartment when I stopped by, I would make my excuses and leave quickly. In group settings, I positioned myself on the opposite side of the room, engaging in animated conversations with distant cousins. I could feel his eyes on me sometimes, a heavy, questioning gaze. I never looked back. But there were moments when escape was impossible. One of those moments was the mandatory dance lesson for the wedding party. The six of us, Stella and Julian, the best man and his wife, and another bridesmaid and me, stood awkwardly in a mirrored dance studio. A perpetually smiling instructor named Chloe was trying to teach us a basic waltz. "It's all about the connection," Chloe chirped, clapping her hands. "You have to trust your partner, feel their lead. Let's have the bride and groom demonstrate." Stella and Julian moved to the center of the floor. The music started, a slow, romantic melody. They fell into the steps with an easy grace that was beautiful and painful to watch. Julian held his fiancé, but his face was a blank mask. He moved with practiced perfection, but his eyes were distant. At least, that's what I told myself. Then came the inevitable. "Okay, everyone find your partner," Chloe announced. The other bridesmaid was paired with the best man's brother, who had been roped in, which left me with Julian. The best man had 2 left feet, and his wife had taken over leading him, so Chloe, in her infinite wisdom, decided the groom should help the maid of honor. "Julian, you're a natural. Why don't you dance with Eleanor for a moment? Her partner is missing in action," Chloe said. Stella, busy laughing at the best man's fumbling, waved a dismissive, happy hand. "Yes, go on. Show my sister how it's done." My heart hammered against my ribs. It felt like a trap, a spotlight suddenly shining on the two of us. Slowly, Julian walked towards me. He didn't smile. He simply extended a hand. To refuse would be to cause a scene, to raise questions neither of us could answer. With a sense of dread, I placed my trembling hand in his. His touch was electric. It was a jolt of warmth that shot up my arm and spread through my entire body. He pulled me gently into the dance frame, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine. We were close, closer than we had been since the party. I could smell the faint, clean scent of his cologne. I kept my eyes fixed on a point over his shoulder, refusing to meet his gaze. "Just follow my lead," he murmured, his voice low enough for only me to hear. We began to move, my feet stumbling at first. I was stiff, resistant. "Relax, Eleanor," he said softly. "It's just a dance." But it wasn't just a dance, it was a conversation. With every step, with the firm pressure of his hand on my back, he was communicating everything he couldn't say. "I'm still here. I still feel it. Do you?" My body betrayed me. Against my will, it began to respond to his lead. My steps smoothed out, my shoulders relaxed. We moved together, a seamless, silent unit, circling the room. For a few stolen moments, the world fell away. There was only the music, the movement, and the terrifying, undeniable connection between us. My eyes fluttered closed, and I allowed myself to just feel. It was like coming home to a place I'd never been. I made the mistake of opening my eyes. And when I did, they met his. The intensity was back. The raw, unguarded emotion that I had seen at the party. It was all there. The apology, the longing, the desperate question. And in that moment, I knew he could see the same thing reflected in my own eyes. I couldn't hide it. The music ended. We broke apart, and the spell was shattered. I felt cold without his hand on my waist. We rejoined the group, my face flushed. Stella came over, beaming. "See? I knew you had it in you, Elle. You two looked so natural together. For a second there, you looked like you could be the ones getting married." She meant it as a compliment, a funny, sisterly observation. But her innocent words landed with the force of a physical blow. A wave of nausea and panic washed over me. The air in the studio suddenly felt thick, suffocating. I couldn't breathe. "Excuse me," I muttered, my voice tight. I need some water." I turned and fled, pushing past the smiling instructor, past the mirrors that reflected my pale, horrified face. I didn't stop until I was outside in the cool evening air, leaning against the brick wall of the building, gasping for breath as if I had just surfaced from underwater. The stone in my gut was no longer cold. It was a burning, searing coal of guilt and impossible desire. Stella's words rang in my ears. "You looked like you could be the ones getting married." And the most terrible part? For one breathtaking moment while I was in his arms, it had felt true. The dance lesson was the breaking point. The charade was no longer sustainable. The wall I had built around myself had been breached, and I could feel it crumbling brick by brick. Every smile I gave Stella felt like a lie. Every conversation about the wedding felt like a betrayal. The joy had curdled into a constant, low-grade dread. The wedding was 2 weeks away. The invitations had been sent, the gifts were arriving daily, and the house was filled with the palpable excitement of the impending celebration. For everyone else, it was a countdown to a joyous union. For me, it was a countdown to a catastrophe I felt complicit in creating. I knew I had two choices. I could say nothing, watch my sister walk down the aisle toward a man who had confessed his love for me, and let that poison seep into the foundation of their marriage and my relationship with my sister forever. Or I could do the single most terrifying thing I had ever contemplated. I could tell her the truth. The thought made me physically ill. I imagined her face, the confusion turning to disbelief, then to hurt, then to a rage so profound it would incinerate the bond between us. She would see me as the villain, the jealous, lonely sister trying to sabotage her happiness. She would never forgive me, and I wouldn't blame her. But what was the alternative? A lifetime of whispered secrets? Of watching her build a life on a foundation of lies? Julian had put me in an impossible position, but my silence was making me his accomplice. My loyalty to Stella couldn't be a passive thing. It had to be an action. And the only loyal action left was the one that felt like the greatest betrayal. I found her in her apartment, surrounded by boxes of wedding favors. She was tying delicate silk ribbons around little boxes of handcrafted chocolates, a small, contented smile on her face. Seeing her like that, so happy and unsuspecting, almost made me turn and run. "Eleanor, just the person I wanted to see. Can you help me with these? My fingers are starting to cramp," she said cheerfully. I didn't sit down. I stood in the middle of the room, my hands clenched at my sides. "Stella, we need to talk." My tone made her look up. The smile faded from her face, replaced by a flicker of concern. "Okay, you sound serious. Is everything all right?" "No," I said, my voice shaking. "Nothing is all right." I took a deep breath, the air burning my lungs. And then, the words tumbled out. I told her everything. I told her about the engagement party, the hushed conversation behind the sculpture, the exact words Julian had used. I told her about his phone call, his confession that he pictured a life with me. I didn't spare myself. I admitted how confused I was, how I had immediately told him to stop and to be happy with her. I just laid the ugly, painful truth out between us. When I finished, the silence in the room was absolute. Stella hadn't moved. She sat perfectly still, a half-tied ribbon in her hands. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the wall, but her gaze was 1,000 miles away. I braced myself for the explosion, for the tears, for the accusations. They never came. After what felt like an eternity, she spoke, her voice eerily calm. "I knew," she whispered. I blinked, sure I had misheard her. "What?" "I knew," she repeated, her voice a little stronger now. She finally turned to look at me, and her eyes weren't filled with rage. They were filled with a deep, bottomless sorrow. Not the details, not what he said, but I knew something was wrong. At the dance lesson, the way you looked at each other, there was more there than just a waltz. I've felt him slipping away for months. He's here, but he's not. He's kind, he's supportive, he does all the right things. But he's performing, and I think I have been too. She dropped the ribbon and stood up, walking over to the large window that overlooked the city. "Do you know what I thought when you told me you were a historical researcher?" My first thought was, how is she ever going to make a living doing that? But my second thought was that I was jealous. "Jealous?" I asked, bewildered. "Of me? You chose something you loved," she said, her back still to me. "You didn't care if it was practical or if people understood it. You just did it. My whole life I've done what was expected. The right school, the right career, the right apartment, the right fiancé. I've been so busy building this perfect life I never stopped to ask if it was the life I actually wanted. Julian was the final perfect piece. And I think, deep down, we both knew he didn't quite fit. She turned around, tears finally streaming down her face. "I'm not angry at you, Eleanor," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry he put you through that. You were more loyal to me than he ever was." In that moment, the roles we had played our entire lives, the successful sister and the drifting one, dissolved. We were just two women, caught in an impossible, heartbreaking mess. I went to her, and we held each other, crying for the wedding that would never happen, for the pain that was yet to come, and for the broken, beautiful, and finally honest bond between us. The wedding was called off the next day. The fallout was messy and painful, just as we knew it would be. But through it all, Stella and I stood together. We faced the bewildered family, the disappointed friends, and the logistical nightmare of dismantling a life that had never truly begun. Our relationship, forged anew in the fire of truth, became my anchor. 3 months later, an email appeared in my inbox. It was from Julian. It was short and simply said, "I know it's too soon, and I know I have no right to ask. But I never got an answer to my question. When you're ready, I'd love to take you for a coffee. And this time, we can just talk." I looked at his words, and for the first time, they didn't fill me with panic or guilt. I thought of my sister, who was rediscovering her own path, applying for a job at a nonprofit she was passionate about. I thought of myself, no longer a supporting character, but the author of my own quiet, meaningful story. I took a deep breath, and with a steady hand, I began to type my reply.